Cool.
Hey everybody, this is Justin.
Hello, I'm Kirsten.
Okay, so we're going to finish up the Q&A for our February theme of the month, which is everything on love, sex, dating, and relationships. You guys submitted some Q&A questions on Slido from last Sunday, but we obviously did not have a chance to answer them all. So Kirsten and I are going to try to do a couple, and we should save the rest for some of our leaders, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah. Want to hear what Sarah has to say about some of this?
yeah, and
Okay.
Stevo.
Okay, so we're just going to we'll just go back and forth. We'll answer some questions, ask some questions, and then keep throwing it back. You want to go with the first one?
Sure.
All right.
Okay, so the first question is, why are babies made the way they're made? Because it's weird.
One who asked that question.
I don't know.
I don't
That's
know
why it's
either.
anonymous.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to take this one?
No, you can take this one.
And fine. Okay, so why are babies made the way they are? Because I think the because it's weird part is just kind of a personal opinion. I think it's made okay from a purely just kind of thinking about it way, nothing super medical. I'm pretty sure that actually the more you think about it, there's actually a lot of evidences for that this is the best way. Um, I think it's confined into the most safest space, um, face to face, right? We're talking about the act of sex itself, right? It's the most intimate form of human relationship, right? You have eyes to eyes, nose to nose, all the body parts together, complementary, male and female together. So I think you have to consider that. I think you also have kind of the safety of the mom's womb, um, nurturing, but also just giving the baby everything it needs to develop and flourish. And so I think you see the beauty that God has put in this, right? It's like, it's not like, oh, let's just see if this thing can survive on its own. I think it's almost like God knew, hey, the way I'm going to design human life to begin is I'm going to make it so dependent on another human being, its mom, to kind of nurture and care for it. And so, um, it just seems like God knew what he was doing when he made the entire process, right? And again, I think you can go into hormones, you can go into kind of like, how just physiologically the act of sex works. And you're just like, hey, it's more than just physical things coming together. I think there's connection points, right? I think there's also like um emotional attachments and these type of things. And so I think there's a ton of research. I don't have it in front of me. I just remembered kind of listening to these type of things. And so is that fair?
Yeah, I think so.
Why just to answer, why are babies made the way they are? I think God's really, really smart about it. He created it to be not just functional, but he made it intimate. I think that you can't discount that. So, all right, fine. If I got that one, I'm gonna ask you this one. How do you
Okay.
find the right people to date slash becomes friends with?
Hmm.
How do you find the right
Well,
people?
I yeah, how do you find the right people? I think
Wait, hold on. It's how do you find the right people to date? Let's
yeah,
do
it
that one
says
first.
slash become friends with. Okay. So finding the right people to date. You can call me old school, but I think the best way is meeting them face to face. I'm not against finding people online, swiping left or right necessarily, but I think finding the right people comes with being in spaces or communities where you want to be, like places where you
Yeah,
feel safe, right? So I think first you could say church. If you think church is a safe place, then be open to people there. Maybe you're thinking outside of just our church. You could think I don't know, camp or other Christian communities where you could find, a safe community and maybe safe people within there. And I think the same can go for like anybody, Christian or non-Christian. You can say that about, your extracurricular activities, your clubs, anything like that. That would be a good place to find the right people to date.
yeah. And I would add on, and I'm like, it's not just the place. I think it's supposed to be what the place symbolizes, right? And again, obviously, if you go to church, it doesn't mean that everyone's a Christian or they're even on the same level and stuff. But at least the building itself goes, hey, we're a place that you can choose to come to, right? And on the surface level, these are what we stand for. And so when you go to that place, at the very least, those people have chosen to go there, right? Now, maybe they're forced, who knows? But it should do that, right? So again, like big family dinners, right? Family, friends, and all that type of stuff. Like at the very least, you're like, okay, we have some kind of connection already established, and I think that's a huge place. Is there anything else you would add to that? How do you find?
Um, no, I think that's about it. I think the first step really is just being in a safe space. And then from there, yes, like Justin was saying, people may not all be there for the same reason, but they did choose to be there for some reason. So you can at least
Yeah.
start there.
If I can overanalyze the question, it says, how do you find the right people to date? I think you, as the person looking, you got to be intentional about it too. I think that the thing is, it's not just going to randomly fall into your lap. Um, Unless you're playing a game or something. I don't know. But like, right, like you gotta be thinking, like looking around. And again, I not in a stalker way, like don't just go to a place and just like, ooh, who do I date? I think it's being observant over time in community. Can we do that? Like you're observing the other person and you're like, oh, hey, I noticed that that person actually is actually really nice. And they're not trying to put on a show when they're just with me. Like they're, or hey, like I've noticed that person very earnestly picking up trash like afterwards. And you're like, oh, okay, I could see some of the characters in that. So it's observing intentionally, over time in the community. And it takes some time, right? So, all right. Next question we got is, how do we give dating advice to non-Christians?
That's a good question. I think I think the first thing is there's some basic morals I feel like everybody would
Everyone.
follow,
Yeah.
like common grace kind of thing, like
It
don't
doesn't matter if you're Christian
steal.
or not Christian. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't lie to your partner. Things like that. So I think in giving advice, dating advice to non-Christians, just look for things that y'all can agree on. And if you see, I don't know, characteristics or traits in somebody that you think may not be good for your non-Christian friend, like I said, lying, stealing from you in some way or from others, just these common grace characteristics that aren't good, you can just start from there and kindly talk to your friend about it.
Yeah. Well, I would say also go broad, right? I mean, again, that's gonna go Christian, non-Christian, but like dating advice in itself should, at the very start, right? It should be broad, right? Like, hey, these are relationships. These are just basic relationship principles, which I think can be, you know, subtly Christian or inherently Christian, but doesn't need to be explicitly just for the Christian. But I think I could definitely, as you can think through it, oh, hey, there's definitely like there's a reason why this advice makes sense, right? Um, but yeah, I mean, I would go broad on the dating advice. Um, and then I think to a non-Christian, I think again, I wouldn't focus too much like, at this point on it, right? They're your friend, they're another human being. I think you can make some bridges there. I do think though is what's gonna change or what needs to change as you guys continue to think is start to ask questions. If you're the Christian and you're talking with your non-Christian friend or person about dating, I think at some point you got to make that shift to be like, hey, hold on, is there a difference between the advice I'm going to give to a Christian and non-Christian, and why, and what is that, right? And I think that does need to come into play, somewhere. Okay. All right. Next question.
Okay, it says the LGBTQ plus community is very diverse. Is everyone who identifies under one of their labels biblically incorrect?
It's a big question. So let's agree with what we can agree with. The LGBTQ plus community is very diverse. I think absolutely right, and I think what makes it even more difficult is it continues to change because that plus sign, right? I think you're constantly doing that, and then if if you're a parent in here or you're listening to this one and you're still like, I'm still very confused on these type of things as well. I think this is a good chance to just be like, hey, I probably need to talk more and do some more study. Um, I think even inside of all of those letters, you have a spectrum as well. I think it's not just, all lesbians are one way and all bisexuals are this way. I think there's multiple nuances under every single label. So let's just make sure that we're fair in our defining. Um, is everyone who identifies under one of their labels biblically incorrect? What's your gut reaction to that statement?
Um, I think is everyone who identifies under one of their labels biblically incorrect. I think my first reaction is just yes, sin is sin, but like I wouldn't just be focusing on these labels, like just this specific like few letters. But yeah, I would need to think about this one more.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. Well,
Like
okay.
how to
So
answer it.
yeah, and again, this is the hard thing with just having questions with no context, right? Like you're trying to assume motives, but you can't really do that. If you're asking if if the goal of the question is to call out people just for the sake of calling out them, then I'm like, I don't know what you're going for. But if you're having an honest dialogue about like, hey, what does the Bible how does the Bible treat LGBTQ, right? I think on the broad end, I would say these things are distortions of what is biblically there or natural, right? I think they're distortions. I think it's sexually broken. But then I would also add in terms of sexually broken, I would throw in heterosexual, right? Because you could throw everyone is sexually broken at some degree. Are the LGBT worse sexually broken? No, right? In that regard. Now, are there different collateral damages, and um, you know, are there other things that it can affect? I think it is, right? And so in that sense, I think there's a little bit of a difference when it comes to that. But biblically incorrect, I would phrase it differently if you're asking these questions again, or if you're thinking in these categories, because if whoever wrote this question, again, I'm not pointing at you, but I'm just like, hey, want to phrase questions to where you're not directly attacking the person, right? Because I think that not only shuts off the conversation, but you're already making assumptions. Um, and again, we want to see the other person as a human being made in God's image, who's as broken as you are, right? But maybe differently. But so if I can help you rethink the question, just kind of keep that in mind. Does that help? Let we can come back to this one because this is a huge, huge topic. And so hopefully we'll make a follow-up episode with some people. So, um, do you want to take this one or are we gonna best tips to going through a breakup?
I can
Let's
start.
let's assume that this person is in a breakup or about to go in a breakup or counseling someone in a breakup. What are some of your tips? Do you isolate? Do you get angry, slash someone's car? What do you do?
I think the first thing is to have some sort of community around you while you're going. Well, one, while you're in the relationship, I think it's always healthy not to be isolated because then that makes the breakup a lot more difficult if it's just you and this other person in your own little bubble. So if you break up, the bubble's gone and then you have nobody left.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think the best thing to do is to be surrounded with your friends. Also, I would say some mentors who can sympathize with you, empathize with you, but also give you just some foundation of like, okay, this is what truth is and this is what reality is, while yes, also feeling for the person that's going through the breakup. That would be
Yeah.
my first tip.
Okay. I would say it's okay to, I mean, best tip is I don't think you need to shut off your emotions or what you're really feeling. I think the Bible's very clear. Hey, there's times to grieve and there's times to feel sadness and pain. Um, I think you gotta kind of own up some of those feelings. So some of the best tips is just, hey, don't ignore some of the feelings. I think those are supposed to lead you to a healthy time to process, though. I think that's where your advice comes in very keenly of like, okay, hey, sometimes my emotions are gonna take me to like a really dark psycho way of going to process it. And I think this is where like people be like, hold on, like emotions, fine, but it can lead you somewhere where you don't want to go. And so it should kind of tip you off to be like, hey, I need to think through some stuff. And so what just a couple of big tips is any breakup, you're going to start thinking about your identity, right? Like it's going to really kind of put your identity on display. Who am I? Am I not loving enough? Did I do something wrong? Did I do all these type of things? And look, answer could be yes. Like you could have been the reason why, right? But I think it's supposed to bring you to a point where like, okay, was my entire identity based off of my relationship status, or did I find my entire identity in that other person? You know what I mean? And so the breakup is supposed to kind of whip you back into reality and to be like, hold on. Like if you're not a whole person as a single, then you're never a whole person as a couple either. I think your whole identity, right, is to be found as a child, daughter of God, whether single or dating. And I think that has to start there. So it's almost like a, hey, like let's snap back to reality. And in this process of dating, I'm like, okay, like learn what it means to be a single, right? Rather than like trying to think about who's the next person I can date. I think that would be a unwise decision after during a breakup to be like, okay, what do I need to do to get back in the relationship? I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Question. How do you approach your friends when your personality is more casual and less serious with a more serious situation like religion? Uh, okay. So I think the question is saying, let's let's say we're friends and we're like pretty cash, but then like you want to bring in religion, which is more serious. How should you do that? Or should you do it?
Yeah. I think that's what they're asking. Yeah, so I would say yes, you
Yes,
should.
what? Wait,
You
should
should be
what?
bringing it's good to be more serious with your with your casual friends. That's great. I think you should be able to go deep with your friends to some extent. Every friendship's going to look a little different.
And this is just
Um
friends, right? We're not talking about romantic
yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, we're just maybe talking about like a group of friends at school. I don't know, something
Yeah,
like
okay.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. Um but I would say like how do you do that? I think you can just start by initiating conversation yourself. Like just you going and at like just talking about something a bit more serious, but not in a completely random weird way, which I think this is different for each situation. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to give some general advice for people.
Well, I mean, I think if you're friends for X amount of time, like longer, like hopefully your religion isn't some kind of like add-on to your life. Hopefully it kind of permeates everything. So hopefully, if you've been a friend with somebody for like, 3, 5 years, like they should know not only that you are religious, but like more, right? Like if after a couple of years, if they have no clue that you're religious, much less a Christian, I'm like, that's kind of weird, man. Like either you guys don't ever talk about anything deep, or they just don't know you. Because it's like, hey, where'd you go this weekend? Like, oh, I went to church. Okay, well, what was that all about? Which hopefully they kind of understand where at least your calendar is. How do you approach it? I think you do it normally. I don't think, like you said, I don't think you force it, you make it weird. But I think it's like, again, I think what we're trying to do, especially in our youth group, is, and again, for you and I, right, Kirsten, like we're going through this podcast because we're trying to help our people process and think through not just the questions, but like, hey, in a normal day life, how should our middle schoolers, how should our high schoolers act? And I'm like, hey, your faith shouldn't just be on the weekends. It should be kind of it's on your mind, right? You're like constantly praying for other people, or you're using your money a certain way, or you're even like not getting on certain social media sites because of your faith, right? And so your friend should like, hey, why aren't you doing this or these type of things? Um, I think that's what we want from our students. What we want for our leaders and everybody. It's just you're living life as a Christian, not right? Like with the Christian add-on, I think. So I don't know. You have anything to add?
Yeah, I think one of the things you've mentioned before, Justin, to at least our youth members is if your friends want to hang out with you on the weekend and you're like, oh, I got church or something like that, it's that your friend may ask, oh, what do you do at church? I think that's a great time to maybe just
Yeah.
get a bit deeper, like, oh, this is why I go to church. Besides just saying something like, oh, I go to CBC and then leave it at that. You can also go into, oh, this is why I go to church. This is why I
Yeah.
choose to go there instead of sleeping in or
Yeah.
hanging out
Answer
with
the
you for
why.
this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just answer the why, and then you could also use that as a time to invite them if you want, or you can I don't know, just begin talking more about spiritual things with them every day when you see them.
So okay, so I think one of our things that we started this semester, and if you're a youth, you should know this. We gave you some goals, right, for the spring semester, and some of your goals wasn't just to be like, hey, be passive about your faith, but it was be more active, right? And we were like, hey, we challenge you. Go to a couple people, and your question to them is, hey, I'm going to pray for you, right? What can I pray for you about? So the assumption is you're already praying for them. And so, but what you're doing, and the reason why we challenge you to do this is because we want you to like ask them, right? Hey, my faith is serious. I care about you. And so I'm going to pray for you. But how do you want me to do that? Right. And I think that's part of it. Same thing with, like inviting them out. I think it's also like, hey, we've been friends for a couple years. Can I tell you more about what I learned this weekend? I think it's just some of that stuff. I mean, that's not like crazy hard. It's just being a good friend. It's just learning how to talk to each other. And if again, it's your friend, like y'all should be able to talk. Like that should not be the thing that breaks your friendship whatsoever. All right, we have time for a couple more. Um, which one do you want to hit? Oh, there's a lot. Uh, why are boys these days so immature? All right, let's bash on boys. What you got?
Okay, let's see.
No, I don't
Boys.
want to bash on boys.
We're just gonna talk about, yes, we're not gonna single out any specific boy or even I would say group of boys, like middle school boys or high school boys. Just boys in general,
Okay,
because I
hold
don't
on.
know who's
Are
asking.
boys now, it says, why are boys these days, right? So again, this is
Yeah,
always time contextual, right? Are boys more so immature nowadays?
I don't think so. If we're talking about boys in
Really?
general, I don't think they're more immature. No, because I think, okay, I think technology is different nowadays than it was 20 years ago. So I think the way we see immaturity with boys or anybody in general is going to look different. Because
And
I can't
also
say for sure.
immaturity in relation to culture and to how it should have been mature into girls.
Yeah, I do not know what the person means by immature. I'm going to take it
Okay,
as,
let me throw why are they so immature in relation to what they notice at church?
okay, why are the boys so immature? Okay, at
Just how they act.
church.
And it's
Yeah,
got to be how they act.
I think I would say first off, it's just a developmental thing. Girls and guys just think differently, and
Sure.
that's okay. Yeah, and that's okay. I think that the reason why we see them act the way they do, maybe at church, is it's not as structured as a classroom. Um, we give all of our students snacks and the freedom to play games and do whatever. So we're going to see boys express that through maybe running around, jumping on each other, uh, things like that. While the girls are more likely to go sit, maybe just talk, play a little game. And I think that that's just a difference in how we want to use our free time. I don't really know how much I can speak on like the immaturity part because I think, like I said, everybody just expresses themselves differently.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna end this on a pastoral note then, if I can do that. Um, Mature, immature, again, I think it's relative to the person asking it, right? I mean, again, you can't just generalize all boys as immature. I mean, it depends because there's some pretty mature guys, I would say. Um, but I think the beauty slash difficulty of a community is you're gonna have mature and immature simultaneously. You're gonna be mature and immature simultaneously to certain people, right? I think that's you gotta recognize that, right? Now, what do you do if you are in the mature spot and you do recognize immaturity? I think rather than roll your eyes or get away from the immaturity, what the church should be different at is, hey, we see that and we go, hey, those immature guys, if you will, that's not my problem. That's my responsibility, right? Like you see yourself as the older brother or older sister and be like, hey, those are my guys, right? They may be immature, but that's my family. So let me take my responsibility and not necessarily getting them to mature, but to be like, okay, hey, okay, I see that they may have a couple years to mature out or they got these type of things, but what can I do? Right? Because I think that's the question. Instead of waving that finger and be like, man, that guy needs to mature up. I'm like, hey, maybe you were put in this community to help that process for them to mature up. Right. And so I don't think you're the reason that they're immature, but I go, hey, you could be the solution. Right. And I think part of the thing with being a community right now is we don't we don't define people by what we perceive as their negatives, right? We perceive them as, hey, they're just another image bearer like me, and I was that person once, and so I need to extend grace because I got extended grace. Like, because think about this, right? Like everyone's looking back down at someone younger and be like, oh God, these crazy people. At the same time, I'm like, hey, so were we, right? And so I think that's the gospel. It's the fact that hey, we received grace, therefore we extend grace. Someone was patient with us, therefore we're going to be patient with them. But then at the end of the day, I'm like, hey, right, like they're part. I need to be glad at least they're part of this community that I'm a part of, and that's my responsibility. So be part of a community and be like, look, there's always going to be mature and immature people, right? Could you imagine how frustrating it would be if everyone was matured, right? Like that would be the most suffocating place because you'd be like, oh, I got to act a certain way, and you would become the immature one. And so, which doesn't make any sense. And so, all right, let's pause it here and let's go part two with more leaders later. All right, guys, later.
Yeah.